NASA once promised that pieces of Mars would be on Earth by the early 2030s. Now, that same timeline may stretch to 2040 if it happens at all. While the US debates budgets and redesigns, China is preparing to launch its Tianwen 3 mission as early as 2028, with plans to deliver samples around 2031. How did the tables turn so quickly? In the next few minutes, we'll dissect how China built a faster, simpler, and more unified road to Mars, while NASA's flagship program struggles to leave the drawing board. But before we dive in, please hit subscribe and like the video. Your support means the world to us. It helps us grow the community and bring you even more exciting space discovery videos. Thanks a lot. And now let's dive in. Why is NASA's most ambitious Mars project facing the same kind of delays that once bogged down Cold War-era space programs? The agency's dream of returning Martian samples has become a marathon of redesigns, shifting budgets, and managerial uncertainty. What began as a straightforward partnership between NASA and the European Space Agency has turned into a puzzle that grows more tangled every year. The Mars sample return mission was once meant to prove that international cooperation could do what Apollo did for a single nation, show that humanity could collect pieces of another world and bring them home within a decade. That early vision was filled with optimism. Engineers imagined a sleek choreography of machines, a sample fetch rover racing across the Martian surface, scooping up tubes of rock collected by Perseverance, then handing them off to a small rocket, the Mars Ascent Vehicle, that would fire them into orbit. Waiting above was the Earth Return Orbiter, ready like a catcher's mitt to grab the canister, seal it, and fly it across 300 million kilometers back to Earth. It would be a proof of precision, robotic teamwork in an environment more hostile than anywhere humans had ever tried to operate. For a while, it looked achievable. The plan was timed for a 2033 arrival back on Earth. But optimism collided with bureaucracy. Every stage of the mission depended on multiple contractor teams, multiple management chains, and multiple nations approving budgets on different timetables. When one element slipped, a late prototype, a higher mass estimate, or a funding shortfall, the whole chain had to be recalculated. A few months became a few years. Each redesign required another review cycle, another cost estimate, and another public explanation. The fixes didn't simplify, they multiplied. The Mars sample return turned into a living project plan with more moving parts than any mission before it. Those interlocking parts created fragility. The architecture, lander, ascent vehicle, orbiter wasn't just complex in engineering terms, it also depended on political continuity that NASA rarely enjoys. A new administrator might shift emphasis toward human exploration, or Congress might prioritize a lunar landing window. The leadership rhythm at NASA is typically 4 to 8 years, while the mission's timeline stretched beyond 15. The result was a mismatch between engineering stability and political cycles. By the time NASA's internal reviews reassessed the program, costs had ballooned into billions beyond the initial projections. Some estimates suggested cuts would be required elsewhere in planetary science to keep Mars sample return alive. In recent budget plans, space science faced reductions exceeding 40%, with more than 40 smaller missions on the chopping block. That number shocked many inside the community, not because the science lacked value, but because Mars sample return had absorbed the oxygen once spread across many projects. At the same time, tensions between program lines deepened. NASA's Artemis program, focused on lunar exploration and long-term crewed missions, competed for the same financial and political capital. The Mars team argued that returning samples could unlock answers about life beyond Earth. The human spaceflight side countered that Artemis built the infrastructure needed for Mars in the first place. Both goals relied on similar budgets, and neither could fully thrive. The outcome was stalemate. Enough funding to study designs, not enough to lock them and move forward. Review panels quietly warned that the project's management complexity was outpacing its stability. Each review concluded with the same message. The risk wasn't the science or the hardware. It was the shifting environment trying to sustain them. As redesigns stacked up, the 2033 timeline faded from possibility. The latest assessments now push potential sample return dates well into the late 2030s or even 2040. What was supposed to be a decade-long sprint became a generation-long endurance test. the engineers haven't lost their skill. The slowdown is institutional. A web of committees, competing priorities, and fluctuating leadership has become the mission's real gravity well. The agency that once thrived on open collaboration is now struggling under the weight of its own openness. And while NASA continues to refine concepts and rebalance budgets, another nation is quietly preparing for liftoff. If complexity has paralyzed America's path to Mars, China's focus may be the key to moving faster with fewer debates. While NASA's plans have been cycling through redesigns, China's Mars roadmap has stayed almost perfectly on schedule. The difference isn't luck, it comes from how the two agencies think about time and control. China organizes its deep space programs under one long-range plan that connects its lunar, crewed, and planetary goals. Each new milestone is built directly on top of the last. There's no division between Moon program and Mars program. It's a continuous path measured in decades, not election cycles. The same policy framework that guided the Chang'e lunar series is now supporting Tianwen 3, China's Mars sample return mission. The agencies involved share long-term funding and develop hardware with overlapping designs. Milestones such as the Long March 10 test fire or the recent Lunar Crew abort system trial are not random announcements. They are rehearsals for larger ambitions. Every system proven in one project feeds into the next one. Propulsion tests, guidance algorithms, and re-entry capsules serve double duty, forming a stable chain of progress toward deep space missions. This vertical integration has allowed China to move faster without appearing rushed. Tianwen 3 reflects that approach clearly. Instead of multiple international contracts or layered mission components, it uses a compact two-launch system. One rocket will send a lander and ascent vehicle toward Mars, while another launches an orbiter designed to rendezvous with the sample capsule and bring it home. The architecture avoids complex robotic handoffs between separate rovers and orbiters. Fewer moving parts mean fewer approval cycles, fewer redesigns, and much lower risk of cascading delays. From a planning standpoint, it's the opposite of NASA's sprawling network of dependencies. The projected timeline makes that clear. Tianwen 3 could launch around 2028 and return samples to Earth by 2031. That window sits nearly a decade earlier than NASA's reprojected Mars sample return schedule, which may not deliver until the late 2030s or even 2040. The simplicity of China's method translates directly into time saved. Even so, simple in this context doesn't mean low tech. The mission still requires precise orbital coordination, autonomous docking, and safe sample handling through re-entry, all critical steps that demonstrate advanced capability. The difference is that the chain of command remains intact from start to finish. Beijing's centralized structure allows the mission to operate under a single decision clock. It's a model that minimizes public debate over funding cycles, but maximizes continuity. Once a mission enters the 5-year or 15-year plan, it's treated as part of a national roadmap, not a temporary project subject to changing priorities. Political stability becomes an engineering advantage. Scientists work on multi-decade timelines knowing that their budgets, suppliers, and leadership will remain consistent. That alignment of strategy and execution has turned China's space program into a disciplined production line rather than a series of one-off experiments. This long-range predictability also carries geopolitical weight. The race for Mars samples isn't just about science, it's about influence in setting the norms for future deep space activity. As Mike Gold noted during a US Senate hearing, the countries that get there first will write the rules of the road for what we can do on the Moon. The statement applies just as strongly to Mars. Returning samples first would allow China to define new standards in planetary protection, resource use, and international cooperation. Each successful milestone reinforces its voice in those emerging rules. China's system works because it enforces integrated pacing. Every mission follows a steady rhythm that links research, production, and launch. The trade-off is reduced transparency and fewer opportunities for outside collaboration. But the payoff is an almost unbroken march toward major goals. Instead of constant internal negotiation, planners can focus entirely on execution. That consistency, not superior technology, has become China's quiet advantage. While NASA re-evaluates roles, budgets, and redesign cycles, China is already closing its countdown window. The real question is whether America can learn from that sense of timing without giving up its collaborative and innovative DNA that once defined its greatest space achievements. The race to return Mars samples isn't really about who lands first. It's about which system can keep focused the longest. America's strength has always been openness, sharing ideas, testing boundaries, and taking risks in public. But that same openness now needs directions strong enough to outlast political shifts and budget cycles. China's method shows what steady pacing can achieve, even when transparency is limited. The United States doesn't need to copy that model. It needs to refine its own. The question is simple but pressing. Can NASA find balance between freedom and focus before the first Martian rocks land in Beijing?